Why is Judge Stango still listed as the president of the Prosecutors Union on the Connecticut.gov website? Why is he still to this day listed as the person who would receive lawsuits on behalf of the Prosecutors Union? Why is a judge who admitted to seeing the evidence before he even got on the bench? Why did he get appointed to this case? And why did the city of Danbury follow this trial all the way through, despite the fact that the prosecutor on the case himself called it a stupid infraction trial? Why is there audio in that video that we just watched together and not in the video that Sean claims he received in evidence? Why did someone turn the volume off and send Sean incomplete evidence? Why is that? Ask yourself. And then once you're done doing that, perhaps ask Danbury. Hello, everybody. How are you doing on this fine Tuesday? Mad about tyranny and corruption like me, I'm assuming. I know a lot of y'all are probably new here from Sean's channel, Long Island Audit. Welcome. I imagine that you're probably pretty upset about the verdict in Sean's case, and as was I when I found out about 2 days ago. My name is BJ Corville, JD, and I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Law School, that's UPenn, not Penn State, in 2020. I practiced law for a little while, and then I realized very quickly that it was a weird, corrupt cult that essentially just uses your license in order to control what you think and say. So I gave the license back, and they can keep it forever because I am not going to be controlled. That's not why you're here today. I just wanted to give y'all a little bit of background into where I'm coming from and why it matters what I'm saying. Now, that being said, nothing I say here today is legal advice. If you are in need of legal advice, please consult an attorney in your jurisdiction. I am not your attorney. I am not licensed in your jurisdiction, and I just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay. Sean is a personal friend of mine at this point, and I do follow along with what Sean is doing, especially in cases where he is being tried criminally, such as in Danbury. Now, me and Sean did work on a big project yesterday that... I'm scared! Oh God, there's the cop cars! Will be forthcoming in the future, but today I really wanted to get this video out as fast as I possibly could. I wanted to boil down my two major issues with the verdict in the Danbury case, and I really only had 1 day of notice to make this video, so it's not going to be quite as in-depth as I would like it to be, but I do want to get this out there because I know y'all are riled up, I know you're fired up, and I see two problems that are actually big issues from a legal perspective. In my opinion, this is not legal advice. Of course, all of these things are innocent until proven guilty, etc., etc. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the first big problem that I do have with this case. The first major problem I have with this case involves the judge. Judge Charles M. Stango. Sean's original video, his original audit of Danbury, Connecticut at the Danbury, Connecticut Library happened back in June 2021.
Actually protected
Put that
activity.
on your YouTube feed because
It's
you're
constitutional.
wrong.
I hate fucking people.
I know.
He's a one. I'm telling you right now. 5 years ago with this shit, he would have been on the ground. Absolutely. 10, 15, 20 years ago, that motherfucker would be dead. He'd be his teeth if he missed. I don't fucking.
So it's been about 1.5 years. Now, in June 2021, the current judge on the case, Stango, he was actually a prosecutor. Not only was he acting at the time as a prosecutor, but he also held a very high position as the president of the Prosecutors Union, essentially in Connecticut. It's called the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors. Not only was he working as a prosecutor, but Stango was also registered and licensed to train police officers in no fewer than 3 separate areas having to do with court procedure, law, stuff like that, in trial preparation. So Stango working as a prosecutor, working as the president or vice president of the Prosecutors Association, which is the union, the collective bargaining unit for prosecutors in the whole state of Connecticut at that point, right? He's the president of the prosecutors union for the whole state of Connecticut. Don't forget that part. So not only was he doing those things, he was training police, working very closely with police officers. And none of these things are illegal. None of these things are in and of themselves even a problem. The problem arises whenever you see that he worked as a prosecutor in some of the same exact divisions and some of the same exact certifications as the prosecutor on Sean's case, Zentner, Russell Zentner. Again, this in and of itself doesn't present a conflict necessarily. However, according to the Connecticut rules that are applied to judges, they are supposed to avoid conflicts of interest and all appearances of conflicts. So I did keep looking into the potential conflicts that this judge has. So now I want to show y'all a little bit of what I found when I started to dig into Judge Stango. All right. So I've now retyped Stango Prosecutors Association. And as you can see, the first thing that shows up on the Google page is Chuck Stango, Judge of the Superior Court, Connecticut. We're going to click on his LinkedIn profile. Now, as we scroll down his LinkedIn, we do see his experience. As you can see, as I already told y'all, he did serve as the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors from March 20 to April 2022. So for 2 years, he was the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors. Right in the smack dab middle of this tenure was when Sean's video, June 2021, of his audit of the Danbury Library and his audit of the City Hall did post. June, July 2021. Okay. So at the time, Chuck, aka Charles Stango, the judge who would eventually decide whether Sean was guilty or innocent, was serving as the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors. Don't make your mind up yet. Just look at all the available evidence and then let me know what you think by the end. So here is a letter that Chuck Stango, Charles Stango, wrote on behalf of the Association of Prosecutors to the Joint Committee on Judiciary. Basically, he was trying to stop a law from being passed in the legislature. I think that he failed on that, but this just shows that he was very active in his job. And look here, it says the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors is the collective bargaining unit representing approximately 20 deputy assistant, senior assistant, and supervisory assistant state's attorneys within the Division of Criminal Justice. And that Division of Criminal Justice is an independent executive agency. Okay. So that's all fine and good. On Chuck's LinkedIn, as I will just remind you, he did claim that he stopped. This is his LinkedIn, right? Chuck Stango, Judge, Superior Court, Waterbury, Connecticut. He claims that April of last year, he was no longer the president of the Prosecutors Association. So, of course, that leads me to ask, who's the current president? Because I'm looking for all appearances of conflicts. Now, you might be wondering why I'm looking for appearances of conflicts, and I will be happy to show you that right now. All right, so here is the Code of Judicial Conduct. This is on the portal of the Connecticut.gov page. Look, I'll show y'all. As you can see up here, portal.ct.gov. Now, here's the canon. There's only 7 damn rules that these people even have to follow. A judge should uphold the integrity and independence of the judiciary. A judge should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all of his activities. The judge should perform his duties impartially and diligently. Impartially is important. I want y'all to keep that impartially requirement in your mind. The judge may engage in activities to improve the law, the legal system, and the administration of justice. The judge should regulate his extrajudicial activities, that means off the bench activities, to minimize the risk of conflict with his or her judicial duties. So he should minimize the risk of conflict. I'm not saying this. I'm telling y'all what the rules are. I'm telling y'all what he swore to be able to do when he said he was going to follow these ethics. Regularly file reports of compensation received for quasi-judicial and extrajudicial activities. So that means if he's getting paid for his work in an organization or something like that, he has to report it and file these reports of compensation. And finally, a judge should refrain from political activity inappropriate to the judicial office. Okay, that's the code of conduct. That's the rules he's supposed to follow. Now, it doesn't necessarily say that he can't be a member of an organization. It doesn't say that he can't have hobbies. It doesn't say that he can't own a business or something like that. But it does say specifically that he really needs to avoid the appearance of impropriety and he needs to minimize the risk of conflicts. So I was thinking when I was doing this research, maybe that's why he quit April 2022 from being the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors because Judge Stango was sworn in to be a judge in April 2022.
I stand here honored and proud this afternoon to support the nomination of Attorney Stango. I've known Attorney Stango and his family for probably 15 years, so I proudly support his nomination, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
And it just so happens to also be exactly the same month that he stopped being the president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors, according to his LinkedIn. Okay. So, of course, I start thinking, who's the new president of the Connecticut Association of Prosecutors? And in order to find that information, I went to the Connecticut Secretary of State's website. Let me pull that up for y'all. Now, most states have a website such as this one. Okay. So as you can see, I typed in Connecticut Secretary of State corporation search, and I am going to go and try and find the business to see who is the president. All right, so now I'm going to type in Connecticut Association of Prosecutors and run a search. All right, here we go, Connecticut Association of Prosecutors. One result found, as you can see, Connecticut Association of Prosecutors. Now, I will remind you, Chuck Stango claims that, almost a year ago, he stopped being the president of this association. I have no idea who the president of this association is, which is why I'm relying on public records filed with the state to determine who the president is, right? I don't know who the president is. I have no idea. That's why I'm relying on government records, state websites, .gov government filings to see who the president is. Connecticut Association of Prosecutors, as you can see, the principals are still to this day, I'm filming this on February 7th, 2022, listed as Charles Stango, Sean McGinnis, Melissa Strito, and then its agent for service of process, meaning if this organization were to get sued, the person who would receive the lawsuit is Charles M. Stango. Let's see more, shall we? All right. So I click the View More button, and this is what we get. Active corporation. Let's see the filing history. The most recent filing, according to this government website, was March 8th, 2021, 2 years ago. Now, we can view a copy of that filing as a PDF, and this is what it looks like. The name of the corporation is here, the activities, justice, public order, safety activities. It's in New Haven. This is a statewide organization or association, I should say. Now, this agent, the previous agent in 2021 was Christopher Godialis, and he looks like he got crossed off. And now we're putting in Charles Stango. Now, this was March 8th, 2021. And Charles M. Stango, Judge Stango, who just found Sean guilty of trespass in cahoots with the police and the prosecutors, who he clearly seems to have former relationships with on a personal level. This guy is still listed as the president of the prosecutors union in the whole state of Connecticut. Now, look, y'all. I am open to the possibility that this is outdated. I'm open to the possibility that somehow, some way, 10, 11 months has gone by and nobody updated the president on the Prosecutors Association. But to me, it appears like a huge conflict. How can Judge Stango be serving as the president of the Prosecutors Union in the whole state of Connecticut? How can someone serve as the president of the collective bargaining unit representing hundreds hundreds of prosecutors, how can that person serve impartially as a judge? Let's say he could serve impartially somehow. Let's say it was impartial. Let's say you skip past the whole entire judicial code of conduct, which requires you to avoid all appearances of impropriety and to minimize the risk of conflict with his duties. Let's say all those hurdles could somehow be cleared by that president of the Prosecutors Association, serving also now as a judge. Let's say all those hurdles could be cleared. Why would that judge's personal LinkedIn say he quit being the president of the Prosecutors Association? Why would he? I mean, like I said, I don't really know anything. I have to rely on government records, public filings. That's what they're for. Public websites such as this exist for exactly this purpose, for us to look into the public institutions, the public officials, and say, are they following all their own rules? Because they sure do like setting rules for us. They sure do like charging us money for exercising our constitutional rights. They sure do like charging us criminally. They sure do like finding us guilty of literal crimes. So these websites exist for exactly the purpose that I am using it today, for us to check into what's really going on. Now, it is possible somebody somewhere dropped the ball that isn't Chuck Stango, possibly. But I just have questions, and my questions have to do with whether Charles Stango really is still the president of this organization. Because according to the Connecticut Secretary of State, Charles Stango is not only the president, he's listed as a principal, and he is the agent for service of process, such that right now, if somebody wanted to sue the prosecutor union, the prosecutor association, right now, they could legally, this is not legal advice, but from what I can ascertain, if somebody wanted to sue the prosecutors union right now, the person who would receive that lawsuit is Chuck Stango. Chuck Stango has worked with Russell Zentner to train police officers in the same departments. He has been a prosecutor for decades. And now it seems, in my opinion, like he is making unfair, unconstitutional rulings in his courtroom to favor the prosecution and to disfavor we the people's rights and the United States Constitution, which Chuck Stango has a primary responsibility to uphold. So if he's supposed to be upholding the Constitution, but he also has a conflict over here because he's the president of the prosecutors union, which has to do with how much prosecutors get paid and what standards they're held to and stuff like that. In my opinion, I can't see that as anything else other than a conflict. Now, adding everything I just told y'all to the timeline, that the first day of Sean's trial, the judge came out and said that he had already seen the whole entirety of Sean's audit before he ever even knew this was his case.
That video was out there and viewed by, I think, all the parties associated with the litigation of this matter, Attorney Zentner, both defense counsel and myself, before I knew this was my case.
So Sean was already being tried in Connecticut as a criminal when Chuck Stango became a judge. Chuck Stango sat on the bench during this trial and said that he had seen the audit footage in its entirety before he ever even knew that this was his case.
Both defense counsel and myself, before I knew this was my case.
So everything I'm about to say now is just speculation, but I think it's important for us to ask these questions. Could Chuck Stango have seen this footage, have seen this audit that now millions of people have seen across all the playlists before he was ever even sworn in as a judge? Could he have come into this case with a bias as the president of the prosecutors union? Sean's going to make the prosecutors look bad if he wins this case because they're stupid for trying a $90 infraction. Is it possible that Chuck Stango has more allegiance, more loyalty to the prosecutors with whom he worked for decades than he does to the United States Constitution? Is it possible that Chuck Stango has more loyalty to his friends at the police department who he helped train than he does to we the people? In my opinion, it's possible. In my opinion, it's likely that Chuck Stango saw this footage way back in June or July 2021
Before I knew this was my case.
whenever Sean got arrested originally, June 2021.
Put
Protected
that on your
activity.
YouTube feed because
It's
you're wrong.
15, 20 years ago, that motherfucker be dead. Easy just keep it, the message.
In my opinion, it's likely that Chuck Stango knew exactly what case this was when it was assigned to him. And it's my opinion that it's possible that Chuck Stango was assigned this case for exactly that purpose, because the city of Danbury, embarrassed, humiliated, wanted to get their lick in on Sean Paul Reyes one way or another. And who better than the guy who was the president of the prosecutors union, besties with the police departments, when Sean originally aired that video that embarrassed the shit out of Danbury, Connecticut. Just wait, there's more. Because if your theory of the case is that this is just a small town that's embarrassed and humiliated by the way that their officers acted, don't forget, this is the place where an armed law enforcement officer with a gun on his belt and a bulletproof vest around his body said that 20 years ago, Sean Paul Reyes would be dead. This is the town where a still employed law enforcement officer with a gun on his waist said that 20 years ago, Sean's teeth would be missing and he would have done it himself. He said that on body camera footage. It's been seen by hundreds of thousands of people across the world at this point, and not a damn thing has happened to that man. As of yesterday, he was still employed with the Danbury Police Department. Okay. If your theory of the case is the same as mine, a small town in Connecticut conspired against an innocent civilian who was trying to protect all of our constitutional rights by exercising them. If you don't use them, you lose them. If that's your theory of the case, then it makes what I'm about to tell you that much worse. Now, I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with the concept of a right to a fair trial, right to due process, all that. We have, as United States citizens, been afforded the right to a fair trial. The right to a fair trial means that you have access to all the available evidence, which may help you to prove your innocence. That is set in stone in the United States through a case called Brady versus the state of Maryland. Now, in Brady versus Maryland, it was a 1963 case. The Supreme Court of the United States determined that defendants in criminal trials have the right to exculpatory evidence. Exculpatory evidence has been defined to mean evidence that tends to demonstrate innocence, evidence that tends to demonstrate a defendant's innocence. Now, in Brady, this case I'm telling you all about from the 60s, it's like as big of a deal as like Miranda. Remember Miranda warnings? You have the right to remain silent, da, 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 da. That's another case that was decided by the Supreme Court. It was an Arizona case. This is one from Maryland, and it is a big, big, big deal. Essentially, Brady stands for the proposition that if a state is going to try and deem you a criminal, charge you as a criminal, and give you a punishment as a criminal, then you as a defendant have the constitutionally protected right to access 100% of the evidence that could help you to prove your innocence. So in Sean's case, let's say Sean's lawyer was trying to argue that this is a bunch of people who are working together, colluding together, who have a bias against Sean because they don't want to be embarrassed. They have a bias against First Amendment auditors coming into their town, and they want to make an example of Sean, even though he didn't break any laws. Let's say that's the theory of the case, right? Then Sean would be entitled to every single piece of evidence, every shred, every scrap of evidence that would help him to prove that. Because if he could prove that, then it would be easier to prove his innocence. Now, the Supreme Court in the Brady case said prosecutors must turn over all favorable evidence that materially relates to a defendant's guilt or appropriate punishment. One more time, prosecutors must turn over all favorable evidence that materially relates to a defendant's guilt or appropriate punishment. Okay, so if it would help Sean favorably in relation to whether he is guilty or in relation to his punishment, in this case it was a fine, then the prosecution must turn it over. So if it fell into that definition, then Zentner must turn it over. Now, the Supreme Court over the years has gone on to refine what they really meant in this Brady decision, what they really meant by material and stuff like that. In a case called Giglio versus United States, the Supreme Court went on to determine that a piece of evidence is materially exculpatory if it would have reasonably affected the judgment of the jury. Now, that's where things get a little bit complicated in this case because there was no jury. They took away and dropped all the misdemeanor charges against Sean such that he was not entitled to a jury trial. He only had this one president of the Prosecutors Association, according to the government website, judge to decide whether he was guilty or not. Okay, so there was no jury. So does Brady really apply here? I think yes. It looks to me like Sean did not get a fair trial. Let's put to the side for one moment all this stuff about the judge being the president of the Prosecutors Association as we speak, according to the government website. Let's put that aside for a moment. Let's pretend that didn't even happen. It's my opinion. Even putting that to the side, Sean did not get a fair trial because it seems, based on statements Sean has made, based on evidence we can see, that this prosecutor, Zentner, violated the Brady standard by not giving Sean all of the evidence that he needed to prove his innocence. And I'll show you what I mean. In Brady and its progeny, which is all the cases that follow along after Brady having to do with that ruling, the Supreme Court has determined that the buck stops with the prosecutor himself or herself. So the prosecutor has to gather all the evidence that the prosecutor is going to use to make his or her case. And then whenever they have that evidence, they really need to turn it all over to the defendants. But in particular, they have a duty, they have a responsibility and an obligation to turn over all exculpatory evidence. Exculpatory meaning could help to prove your innocence if you're a defendant, right? Well, I was talking to Sean yesterday. Oh my God. I am in the Starbucks in Danbury, Connecticut with Sean Reyes. And he told me something that quite literally shocked me. Like, I was getting ready to come tell y'all about this conflict with the prosecutors and all that. And I do think it's a big deal. That's why I led with it. But he told me something so inconceivable, so unbelievable that I didn't even realize it really even happened. I didn't. I thought it was just hypotheticals in law school. But the legal profession and the criminal justice system continues to blow my mind. And so I shouldn't really be surprised by anything anymore. I'm going to show y'all this clip. So in this clip that Sean showed me, you're going to hear clearly that there is some type of audio playing in this police body camera footage. Now, this police body camera footage is from Jacobellis. Whenever this body camera footage plays, you will clearly hear there is audio in the clip. Now, according to Sean, and I kind of see what he's saying, it kind of sounds like this officer might be using a slur against Sean, and in particular, a homophobic slur against Sean. And I will say it is actually not possible to fully tell what the officer is saying because the audio is very distorted. Now, let me just let y'all see that first so that you can see for yourself what I'm saying. Now, according to Sean, who brought this to my attention, it really sounds like Jacobellis is saying, this guy is such a expletive, spelled F-A with a G at the end. I cannot unhear that. So the next question I ask Sean is, do you have that body camera footage? Because this is kind of distorted. It's like played through a open court. It's like recorded from the court. It's not good audio, right? You know what Sean told me? Sean said his attorney received in discovery from the prosecutor that body camera footage with no audio. No audio. I did not get the discovery, but I have no reason to believe that Sean is lying. So I just want to make that small disclaimer. If it's the case, like Sean says, if it's the case that the prosecutor Zentner turned over to Sean that video of Jacobellis saying, this guy is such a bleep, with no audio, then in my opinion, that is a massive, massive violation of Brady versus Maryland and the rules that the court set out in that ruling. Why is it a violation? Well, because what does Brady get at? Exculpatory evidence. What's exculpatory evidence? Evidence that helps you prove your innocence. Well, if the cop is driving through the town talking about this guy's such a beep, it seems like he's got some animosity towards Sean. It seems like he's mad at Sean on a personal level. And it adds to the theory of the defense that this is just a town of good old boys that are trying to stick it to the auditor. One more time, I'm going to play that video for y'all. You tell me what you think you hear. Now, again, one more time. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. Okay, I'm just a girl on the internet who went auditing Danbury, Connecticut yesterday.
Let me just recognize that these are not gold, they're copper.
Sean got a donut. Now I want one. I can't really tell what's being said in that audio. What I do know for certain is it would be a lot easier to tell what was being said in that video if I had the original body camera footage with the audio. And according to Sean, his lawyer was never presented with such audio. I don't know for certain what was said, but I know for certain that if that is what was said, Sean is such a bleep slur, then that's a big deal. Because it shows animosity in the mind of the police officer towards Sean Reyes. It shows animosity towards a whole group of people, which I think needs to be addressed totally separately. And it could lend to the defense helping to prove innocence that this was all just a big setup. This was all just a stick it to the auditor exercise that everybody was in on. Now, it's hard to prove collusion and corruption. It sure is, especially on a stupid infraction trial. But it's my opinion that we are entitled as defendants to all of the available evidence that could help us to make a case of our innocence. And if it is the case, as Sean has said, that they turned over this footage with no audio, but then went on to play this footage with audio in court, if that's the case, it seems to be a massive Brady violation, in my opinion. So what's the next step? Well, the Supreme Court has overturned entire rulings, entire convictions on the basis of Brady violations. So I think an investigation needs to be done into this particular specific piece of evidence, because I know if I was sitting in a jury, or even if I was the judge, it would make a huge difference to me whether one of the officers who perhaps I even trained in the past, looking at you, Stanko, whether that person was calling people beep expletives. It would make a difference in determining the innocence and the guilt of the defendant. It would. It doesn't seem likely that it would have determined the outcome of this particular case, because it seems to me like Stango has been besties with all these people. Like he came into the trial already having seen all the videos, already having had his mind made up. Like he had his decision made up before he ever even sat his ass on that bench. And guess what? Because of judicial immunity, nothing will happen to him, even if all the things that I'm speculating were possibly true. Nothing will happen to Stanko. Now, me and Sean did go to Danbury, Connecticut yesterday. We did audits, not only of the police station, not only of City Hall again, where Phil Janusa was, but we also went to an event where the mayor was and attempted to ask him questions about this particularly.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments for one of your Danbury police officers?
Not right now, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Have a great day. Have a good day, thank you. Do you think that calling somebody a homophobic slur is a good thing, Mr. Mayor? Do you think that's acceptable as a police officer? You're not going to comment on homophobic slurs?
Right now, thank you very much.
We also attempted to ask, or Sean attempted to ask, the police department itself, police representatives from the department, how they felt about tampering with evidence, about potential Brady violations. And it will probably not come as a surprise to you to find out they didn't have much to say.
Event. Aren't you in charge of internal affairs, sir?
I used to be, Sean. How are you?
You're not in internal affairs anymore?
No, I'm not. I'm now the deputy chief.
Now you are the deputy chief?
Yes.
Are you aware that Sergeant Acabellis was caught body camera evidence tampering evidence tampering for my trial and said that I was a FAG. He covered it up by removing the audio from my discovery. Do you have any comments?
No, I have not seen that video yet.
I can send it to you if you like.
I'm sure our internal affairs is already looking into it. I have no comments for you today, Sean.
No comments. What about you, sir? Captain, do you have any comments?
We have mechanisms in place for any allegations that you're making, and they'll follow their way through.
They're not, I mean, they're facts. They're on video,
Okay.
sir.
I understand.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Okay.
Now I have a whole entire video coming out about those audits and about what I saw, what I heard.
Oh, come on. Knock it off.
Look, everybody's
Pay
back.
attention. This is a happy occasion.
It is.
Let's enjoy it. Yeah.
It was really the experience of a lifetime to be able to go on an audit with Sean Paul Reyes in Danbury, of all places. It was really, honestly, I'm still kind of like processing the whole experience. There will be a video about it coming up. But I just want to be clear in my conclusion here. I'm not saying one way or the other that there was certainly a conflict. I'm saying, in my opinion, there appears to have been one. I'm not saying for certain there was a Brady violation. I'm saying that if Sean is to be believed, which I do believe him, then the prosecution did not turn over all of the exculpatory evidence to Sean in order to make his case. And in my opinion, not legal advice, the case should be overturned, a new judge should be appointed, and the trial should happen again. It doesn't seem like Sean got a fair trial, which is another constitutional right that Danbury, Connecticut seems to just have flouted, stomped all over, trampled into the ground, and urinated upon. It doesn't surprise me that Sean's constitutional rights are being violated even more, even to this day, even to this moment, even in this verdict. But I just made this video to encourage y'all to start looking into this stuff, asking questions. Why is Judge Stango still listed as the president of the Prosecutors Union on the Connecticut.gov website? Why is he still to this day listed as the person who would receive lawsuits on behalf of the Prosecutors Union? Why is a judge who admitted to seeing the evidence before he even got on the bench on this case? Why did he get appointed to this case? And why did the city of Danbury follow this trial all the way through, despite the fact that the prosecutor on the case himself called it a stupid infraction trial? Why is there audio in that video that we just watched together and not in the video that Sean claims he received in evidence? Why did someone turn the volume off and send Sean, according to Sean, incomplete evidence? Why is that? Ask yourself. And then once you're done doing that, perhaps ask Danbury. Because in my opinion, they have a lot of explaining to do and a lot of outstanding questions that require answers. Now, this is just the very beginning of my investigation into this judge, into this town. I'm going to be looking into the mayor's big fancy coronation ceremony. I'm going to be looking into the city council minutes of the meetings that allowed the former mayor to get put onto the city council. I'm going to be looking into this new project that they just built with the help of state funding and I'm going to be looking into all of it. And it all could have been avoided if they had just respected people's rights. If there's nothing to find, I won't find nothing. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation. Love you, mean it. Okay, bye.
The state now has a new top prosecutor.
I stand here honored and proud this afternoon to support the nomination of Attorney Stango.
Investigation alleges Richard Colangelo violated policies and procedures when it came to the hiring of his choice.
When your Constitution, you can stick it.
I was arrested
5 years ago with this shit, he would have been on the fucking ground.
I've known Attorney Stango and his family for probably 15 years.
20 years ago, that motherfucker would be dead. Just keep it, people.
I'll knock you down like I knocked trees down all my life.
The position was never posted to begin with.
And I can tell you he's an accomplished thespian. You would be amazed at his
for
talents.
shining a light on the tyranny and corruption.
And this was, I think, an abuse of the public trust.
I was just saying I was nervous, but Sean told me never be scared in the face of tyranny.
Never.
And that's
But
true.
I'm a little nervous because BJ's with me today, so I have to make sure that nothing bad happens to her.
What were you about to say? I have to make sure she doesn't act a damn fool in this city hall.
Oh, come on. Knock it off.
Look, everybody's back.
attention. This is a happy occasion.
It is.
Let's enjoy it. Yeah.
You're right.